Hey, I'm Tim. I'm 46 years old. And for my entire life, I have been trying to live up to this vision of myself that I can do anything, that because of my early interest in technology, because of my academic aptitude, because things came so easily to me in school, because my parents were proud of me, because my friends always thought that I was smart and looked up to me. All these reasons, I felt like, in a sense, I should be achieving something more, something bigger. I graduated high school in 1997. And so this was like at the peak of .com. And I was an early adopter. I was using the internet before the internet existed. But what I never really got was that I was just a consumer. I dabbled in building. I managed to sell my dad's company at the time. He worked for a dental lab company. I managed to sell a website to them back when most businesses didn't have websites. But I had a computer. I had a piece of software called HomeSite, which for you OG internet people, you probably remember HomeSite. It was one of the one of the most popular web development packages at the time. I knew how to write websites. I had a scanner. So I took this company's product brochures, and over a period of a couple of months, I scanned all of them. I typed up all of the details for all of the different products and materials they used, and I created a beautiful website for them. Beautiful by 1997 standards. I made 5,000 US dollars doing that. And at the time, it was the most money I had made doing anything. And I was a bit flabbergasted at how easy it was to make that money. But for whatever reason, it just kind of stopped. I didn't take it anywhere. I didn't ask for a review. I didn't try to sell my services to other businesses referencing the company that I had just helped. I didn't follow up with them to see if they needed any maintenance or updates to the website. I kind of just did it, took my check, and left. And that mindset, this lack of an inbuilt instinct to take what I know and what I can do and scale it into something that builds real value for me as opposed to real value for other people, like a boss, a job, an employer. Like this lack of an instinct to build something durable and for myself, I feel has almost haunted me through pretty much my entire adult life. After having had that initial sort of glimpse of what business would be like, turning my technical skills into money, I ended up taking a job, my first corporate job. I was 19 years old. The website, I was 17. This first job, I was 19. And I remember going in for the interview, answering a few questions which just felt totally random and unrelated to any technical job. This was for an operations job, sitting in like a network operations center, monitoring screens, making sure that production systems are up and running. I didn't know anything about that shit when I interviewed for this job. I just knew that it paid $32,000 and I needed money. Anyway, apparently I made it through this interview with flying colors because by the time I got home, I had a voicemail already saying that I had gotten the job. And that was incredibly validating because I thought to myself, man, these people think it's worth paying me $32,000 based on a 15-minute conversation. But even then, it didn't occur to me that $32,000 that they were going to pay me would pale in comparison to the value that I would create for them. And I could go through the entire CV of instances where this happened. But from those early days of making money as an entrepreneur without even realizing it, treating entrepreneurship more like a job and less like building a business, through to early career, making progressive gains in my career year on year, getting the salary increases, the benefits increases, the business travel, the responsibility, the leadership positions, all of these things came. And I worked really hard, but it felt like they came fairly easily. And it was intoxicating. Being a multi-six-figure earner, coming from not a poor family, but we grew up pretty poor, single parent household for the first half of my childhood. Don't get me wrong, like my parents provided, but it was hard for them. There wasn't a lot of extra. But then to transition from that sort of humble beginning into a multi six figure earner who could basically buy whatever he wanted, it felt very validating. And like I said, it was intoxicating and addictive. And it got me good for a really long time. So long that it was basically 20 years of career on the clock when the first signs of waking up started to occur. And those signs took the form of opportunities that I felt I deserved, but that were kept from me. The promotion that I was too young to have, the responsibility that I just didn't have enough gray hairs for. These are literal things that I was told in the workplace when pursuing the next level of seniority. I hadn't run into those kinds of roadblocks before. At one point, I was denied a promotion because I didn't have a certain degree. But the thing was, is that half the people who had the role that I wanted the promotion into also did not have the degree. They did have the gray hairs. They did have the years on the clock. And it started to occur to me, man, this system, this game that I'm playing, that is gainful employment with a big company, it does have some real serious merits. Like I said, I'd come from very humble beginnings and landed into multi six figures, making more money than either of my parents combined. But it was capped, and it was capped well below what my mental model of myself told me I was capable of. And it wasn't until this moment that these constraints started being applied to me. The reality of the game that I was playing started to set in, that I realized I had probably been playing the wrong game. And that's when my mind started to wander into entrepreneurship and building my own thing. Now, it was no longer the dot-com era, obviously. This is all happening in the mid-2010s. So now we're talking about apps and SaaS. By this point, I had already relocated, thanks to my gainful employment, to Sydney, Australia, which is where I live now and where I call home. And the thing that I remember the most about moving to Sydney was just how incredibly fit everyone seemed. I remember seeing people cycle to work, run to work, doing these things in the rain. I remember discovering end of trip facilities, which I don't know if they have these in America, but here in Australia, a lot of people run and cycle into work. And so they have lots of office buildings have end of trip facilities where people go in and they can shower and change and this and that. The infrastructure is actually built around supporting people being healthy. There are gyms everywhere and fit, muscular people, men and women alike, everywhere. And it was inspiring. I was like, oh, I was a skinny, fat tech nerd growing up. I was programming when I was like 10 years old. And I certainly didn't play any sport, anything that involved coordination. Like, this is just not happening. And I built an identity around it, really. I remember thinking that people who focused on their personal aesthetic, wore cool clothes, had tattoos, muscular people who went to gym and stuff, like those people, in my mind, were almost anti-intellectual. Absolutely preposterous to even think. I think like everyone, I had a lot of really strong and ill-founded beliefs when I was young. But the reality is that I was always a bit jealous of people who had those things. And because I grew up such a non-athletic kid, I didn't imagine those things for myself. But when I came to Sydney, man, it opened my eyes, like just how open the culture was to being fit. I remember I was very insecure about spending time in the gym. I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing. And so rather than get a gym membership, I had convinced myself that it would be a better return if I bought gym equipment. The first place I rented in Sydney, it was a generous place. It had a massive ground floor garage that could fit 5 cars. This was a rental. Anyway, I didn't have 5 cars. I had one. And so I had 4 car spaces worth of room where I could fit out my own gym. So I bought all the things. This was basically like, by the end of it, after 2 or 3 years of building out this gym, it was basically like a private PT studio. Had the crossover, the full rack, had like tons of bumper plates, bars, leg extension, leg curl, leg press, hack squat combo machine, you name it. Like, I pretty much had everything that you could want, even in a commercial gym, never mind just a personal at-home gym. But anyway, I poured my heart and soul into training and learning. And yeah, I started to see results. It was slow going because I didn't really know what I was doing. But yeah, from 2011, when I moved to Sydney, through to about 2015, 2016, this is the first half of my 30s. And for the first time, I'm no longer looking like a skinny fat kid. It's starting to look like a real man, in air quotes. It was fun. I got workmates involved. We would do these transformation challenges. We'd do group fitness stuff after work out at Sydney Olympic Park. It was pretty cool. It was amazing. And what I didn't realize was that it was building a passion for a whole new category of thing, not technology, not programming, but this art and science of bodybuilding, of deciding how you want your body to look and making that happen through the application of repeated stimulus. I didn't call it bodybuilding at the time because I think I probably was still carrying around a bit of this stigma in my mind that overly focusing on the aesthetics was perhaps a bit too anti-intellectual, a bit too Neanderthalish. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I was calling it bodybuilding at the time, but the reality is that it was bodybuilding, right? I was trying to build muscle and lose fat. That's what bodybuilders do. I just wasn't trying to get on a stage. But it was creating this newfound passion for a whole new thing, and became like the seed that ultimately completely overhauled the way that I spend my time, and in the end, the way that I imagine myself putting value into the world. From the very early days of my corporate career, I've been a spreadsheet person. I used to use Lotus 123 at work, just to give you a sense of how far back this goes. Used Excel to solve so many business problems. And so it's no surprise that as I got into training, that spreadsheets became a staple of my approach to training, keeping track of things, basically, workouts, measurements, all that sort of thing. And being really into technology, like I was an early iPhone adopter. In fact, I got an iPhone the first day the iPhone was released, I think in 2007. Being really into tech still, I of course looked at apps as a way to help me get the most out of my bodybuilding journey. And I remember, this is say 2015 or so, looking at the landscape of apps and just thinking to myself, man, these are all just so basic. None of these really do what I want to do. None of these apps do anything with the data. They're basically just these empty vessels. At the time, pretty much the only thing that had happened was people had turned their spreadsheets into apps. And so they were very limited in their scope and ability. And I thought to myself, this is an opportunity. I like bodybuilding. I like technology. I don't like the intersection of bodybuilding and technology as it exists at the time. I should do something about this. And that's where the idea for building my own app started. It took me a while to do anything about this instinct, but I remember in early 2017, I had been expressing an interest in entrepreneurship, but hadn't taken any action on it yet. And my partner at the time became aware of a talk that was being conducted at one of our local universities and suggested that I go to this talk because it was about entrepreneurship. And so I went, and I remember sitting down in the big auditorium and listening to someone who would later become an advisor and a friend of mine talk about the role that entrepreneurship should play in the minds of Australian decision makers, policymakers, et cetera, and how universities in particular should be focused on enabling the next generation of entrepreneurs, because too much energy had been put into building workers, not enough energy put into builders. In other words, the people who would create the future economies that future job seekers would work. And I thought to myself, that is such an inspiring message. I had been a job holder at that point for 2 decades and had found it incredibly unfulfilling. How can I make my work more fulfilling? By putting value into the world and making it possible for other people to create value through what I do. In other words, being the business owner instead of just being the worker. I was completely sold on this. Like one talk, and I was just absolutely convinced that this was the way to go. Now, of course, this whole talk was happening for a reason. It was an advertisement for an MBA program being conducted by the university. And not just your sort of run-of-the-mill MBA, but rather a specific one focused on entrepreneurship. And the hook was, you can come learn the skills of an MBA, but do so in the context of your own business. That was the entrepreneurship part. So the whole program, a 1.5-year program, was designed for you to bring your business idea and build it through the program. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is what I want to learn how to do next. It was like instant sell. I don't think anyone's managed to get $45,000 out of me easier. I went home, pulled up the application website, looked at the requirements. I see I've got to describe my business. What is my business? I want to make a fitness app. And that application was the first time that I wrote down, what is this thing called RESISTX? Anyway, fast forward, I get in. I eventually quit my job at the time because I really want to focus on building out RESISTX. It was the first of several times that I would quit gainful employment in order to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. And yeah, I taught myself React Native. I built an initial version of the app. I found someone to test it for me. Fast forward 1.5 years through the program. We're in the capstone subject of the program, which is basically learning how to pitch your startup. And in what I felt was a pretty competitive field, I pitched RESISTX and I won. I actually won the pitch competition, which blew my mind. And perhaps for the first time in this idea of being a business owner, being a startup founder, and being a fitness person, I'm starting to feel validated. I'm starting to get that same sort of energy that I would get from being gainfully employed, even though I wasn't really making any money. I remember this happens February 2018 is when I do this pitch, and straight after I apply to Y Combinator, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be cool. I'm going to go to Silicon Valley. Anyway, didn't even get a call back from YC. For those of you who don't know what YC is, Y Combinator is largely regarded as the Harvard or the MIT of startups. It is a tech accelerator based out of San Francisco. They've invested in like all the startups that you would have ever heard of or cared about. Incredible network, incredibly selective. And yeah, a fitness app from an unproven founder with no distribution just wasn't cutting it. I didn't get a call back from YC. And shortly thereafter, I quit. I just gave up on RESISTX because I didn't know what to do. I had built a product and I didn't know what to do. But what I did know is that I really liked this fitness space. And even though I didn't know what to do, I wanted to learn what to do. And so after I gave up RESISTX, I was a bit lost. I thought to myself, I'm sitting here as an outsider. I think I'm going to come in and change this industry with my little app. Maybe I should learn something about this industry. And so I thought, I'll go get certified as a personal trainer and learn, what does this industry need? Go live the life, learn the problems, solve the problems, make the monies. That was my thinking. Even though I didn't know what to do with the app that I had built, I was convinced that there was lots of opportunity in this intersection between technology and fitness. And so I tried different things. I started an ed tech company where I worked with fitness influencers and turned their content into evergreen information products that we would then sell on their behalf as a kind of white label. I partnered with some people I had worked with in the past to create a coaching platform. Think Trainerize or Everfit, one of those kinds. Spent a couple of years doing that. Also, COVID had a couple of unfortunate returns to corporate over this period of time. Probably spent about 3 years working corporate in the 8 to 9 years since I had quit. As I sit here today, July 2026. I'm 3 months post separation from my most recent business, the coaching platform. And when I left that business, I still felt there was quite a lot that I had left undone when it comes to exploring this intersection between tech and fitness. And so as I contemplated, what do I do with my time now that I am no longer consumed by this other startup? At the same time, I was once again looking for an app to help me get refocused on my training. And I had a look at the field, apps like Heavy, Strong. And once again, I started to have that same feeling that I had back in 2015 to 2017. It's like over 10 years later, like there's still not an app out there that I really like, that I feel takes advantage of the rich history and data that you can input as a user and turn that into something useful. Again, the apps that are on the market today still feel like they're just spreadsheets turned into apps. And even then, it's like they don't even cover enough of the surface area of bodybuilding to actually be super useful. Anyone who has successfully managed themselves through an extreme body transformation will tell you that there are no fewer than 3 components to building muscle and losing fat. There is a training stimulus component, there is a nutrition component, and there is a recovery component. And if you don't do something about all of these 3 things, the remaining 1 or 2 that you do is almost certainly not enough, not to get an extreme transformation. But then none of the apps that are out there today actually address these things. And on top of these things, there's a whole other constellation of stuff that is useful to know when you are bodybuilding. And I suppose you don't really get the sense of just how much information goes into making decisions when it comes to body transformation until you work with a really competent coach. And I had the opportunity to work with several really competent coaches through the work that I did with my fitness education startup, and also just personally, trainers that I've worked with. The thing that all of the best coaches that I've ever worked with have in common is that they all ask a shitload of information, and they're using that information to make decisions around how to get the most training stimulus, recovery, and growth. But none of the apps out there, none of these apps that claim that they coach you actually do that. They don't even pull in the data, never mind make decisions that are data-driven around how to help you achieve your goals. And so as I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what next? What am I going to do? I realize, you know what? RESISTX still doesn't exist. And so I need to build it. And for the last 3 months, I have. And once again, just like the first time I built RESISTX, nobody knows about it. What am I building? For who? Who's going to use this thing? Now, I guess the difference between me now and me back in 2017 is that I know about distribution. But the thing that I haven't done yet is actually achieved distribution. And that is where you come in. So I'm going to have a go. This YouTube channel is the home of whatever tribe eventually forms around RESISTX. Man, I have no idea how to land this. I don't really know how to describe what this channel is, to be honest with you. I think the best description I have right now is that it's a journal. I love helping people. I love sharing stories with people. I really enjoy connecting with people who care about the same things that I care about. And I feel like of all the ways that I could possibly do that, connect with people who care about the stuff that I care about, fitness, bodybuilding, tech, entrepreneurship, creating value in this world that's being dominated by AI, like being the best version of yourself that you possibly can be, being better in your 30s than you were in your 20s, being better in your 40s than you were in your 30s, and so on. I feel like my best chance of finding this group of people is through this camera, talking to you, because the algorithm knows you and they know me. And so maybe if I just put this out there, it will find people who care about the stuff that I'm doing. And by connecting us, hopefully it makes it possible for what I'm doing to help you. And even better if it helps connect me with you and I can learn something from you. That would be amazing and powerful. And so I think this is the next phase, right? The first phase was very much career driven and trying to make as much money as I can. The second phase was exploring this intersection between tech and fitness. And I suppose this third stage is really about finding community and figuring out my place in the world, where I can make the best impact and where I can grow the most. And so I'm putting these words into this camera and this video into this channel with that hope. I suppose that's really, since there's so many different things I suppose I could say about what I'm trying to do. Obviously, I would love to build a list of people who are interested in using RESISTX, commercialize it, turn it into a big, all those things matter. Yes, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but I think the thing that I'm really longing for is to find the group of people that I can commune with over these things that are rattling around in my head, and for us to help each other grow and be more amazing humans. And honestly, all of that stuff that I was told as a young man by my parents and friends and colleagues about how much they expect me to achieve, like, that chip is still on my shoulder. I'm still trying to do that. And I just don't think I'm going to accomplish it sitting in this room by myself and not connecting to anyone. So here we are. This is what connection is in 2026. Spilling your guts on camera and posting it on YouTube. Anyway, if you've gotten this far, maybe we're each other's kind of people. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me what you want to hear about next.